One fighter went undefeated across an entire career and retired as the most dominant lightweight the UFC has ever seen. Another inherited his throne and became a champion in his own right. Two cousins carry the same last name into cages around the world. And an entire style of fighting, all suffocating pressure and mountain-built endurance, has quietly taken over the lighter divisions of the sport. The world knows the fighters. What the world almost never talks about is the one man who built every single one of them. He never fought in the UFC. He never chased fame. He raised champions in a gym inside his own house, in one of the coldest, most remote corners of Russia. And he died in 2020 before the world fully understood the size of what he had created. This is the story of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, the man who built Khabib, and a dynasty that outlived him. It begins, like so much of this story, in Sildi. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov was born on the 10th of December 1962 in that same tiny mountain village high in the Dagestani highlands, an ethnic Avar in a place where life was defined by cold, hard work and wrestling. Like his famous son would be decades later, his first love was actually soccer. But in Dagestan, wrestling runs through everything, and before long he had traded the ball for the MAT. He earned the title of Master of Sports in freestyle wrestling, one of the highest honors an athlete in the Soviet system could reach. Then, during his years serving in the Soviet army, he added judo and sambo, the brutal Russian grappling art, to his arsenal. Piece by piece, he was assembling the exact toolkit he would one day pour into a generation of fighters. Here is the turning point that almost nobody knows. Abdulmanap was an educated man. He earned a university degree in economics, the kind of qualification that could have set him up for a comfortable, ordinary career. But coaching was the thing that had a hold on him. As an instructor in the army, he had spent years posted far from home. So, with a young family to raise and a calling he could not ignore, he made a decision that would quietly reshape the entire sport. He left the army, went home to Dagestan, and started training fighters. And he started in the most humble place imaginable, his own home. Abdulmanap converted part of the family house into a gym, and inside those walls, he began building fighters from nothing. His own sons trained there, so did the neighborhood kids, and kids from villages scattered across the mountains. There is a famous piece of old footage of a young Khabib wrestling a bear cub in the snow, and while the internet loves it for the shock value, what it really shows is the philosophy of the man behind the camera. Toughness was not optional. Discipline was everything. Respect came before talent. This was a training environment most professional athletes today would refuse to walk into, and it was producing something the world had never seen. Because Abdulmanap was not just raising one great fighter, he was building a system. His coaching career started back in 1987, and one of his earliest triumphs came when his own brother won a Sambo World Championship in the early 90s. From there, the results kept stacking up. He blended wrestling, judo, and sambo into a single, relentless style, and he used it to produce an astonishing 18 world champions over the course of his career. Russia officially named him an honored coach, and in 2019, the Russian Book of Records recognized him as the most successful combat sambo coach in the entire country. He later became the head coach of a team called Eagles MMA, turning a mountain operation into a genuine factory for elite fighters. Now look at what that factory produced. Khabib Nurmagomedov, undefeated, a UFC champion and one of the greatest to ever do it. Islam Makhachev, who inherited Khabib's spot at the top of the sport and became a champion himself. The cousins, Umar and Usman Nurmagomedov, carrying the family name into different promotions, and a long line of Sambo and MMA champions beyond them. The so-called Dagestani style that now strikes fear into entire divisions of the UFC did not appear out of nowhere. It was designed, drilled, and perfected by one man over decades, starting in a room in his house. If you are enjoying this story of the architect behind an entire dynasty, take a second to subscribe. We break down the real people, the money, and the legacies behind the biggest names in fighting every single week. What makes it all even more remarkable is that Abdulmanap was never only a coach to these fighters. To Khabib, he was father and coach at the same time, two roles most people would struggle to separate. He pushed his son harder than he pushed anyone, and Khabib has said many times that everything he became as a fighter traces straight back to his father's lessons. The crushing pressure, the endless cardio, the calm refusal to panic, all of it was built into him from childhood by the man who raised him. When you watched Khabib smother the best fighters on earth, you were really watching Abdulmanap's blueprint come to life. And then, at the worst possible time, it all came crashing down. In the spring of 2020, as the coronavirus pandemic swept across the world, Abdulmanap fell seriously ill. He was hospitalized in Dagestan with pneumonia, then flown to Moscow on a private jet as his condition worsened. He underwent heart surgery for a pre-existing problem, made far more dangerous by the virus, and was placed into a medically induced coma. For weeks, his family and the whole fight world held their breath. On the 3rd of July, 2020, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov died. He was just 57 years old. The reaction said everything about how respected he was. Tributes poured in from across the sport, including from Khabib's old rivals and their coaches, men who had every reason to dislike the family and instead recognized the loss of a giant. His manager described it simply as losing their backbone. The ripple effect changed the sport forever. Khabib had been deep in training for his fight against Justin Gaethje when his father was fighting for his own life. He went ahead with the bout at UFC 254 and dedicated it to his father. He won, as he always did, by submission. And then, in the middle of the empty arena, the most feared man in the division sank to the canvas and wept. His mother had asked him to promise that he would not keep fighting without his father in his corner. He kept that promise on the spot, retiring undefeated at 29-0. The greatest career in the division's history ended not because someone beat him, but because the man who built him was gone. But here is the part that turns a sad story into a lasting one. The machine did not stop when its creator did. Islam Makhachev went on to become a champion. The cousins kept rising. The Dagestani style kept swallowing divisions whole. Everything Abdulmanap engineered proved to be bigger than any single fighter, even his own son. He never got to see just how far it would all travel, how completely his methods would come to dominate the sport he loved. But every time another fighter from those mountains raises a belt over their head, they are finishing a project that a former soldier started decades ago in a gym he built inside his own home. So here is the thought worth sitting with. When we talk about the greatest fighters the sport has ever produced, we name the men in the cage. But maybe the most important figure in all of Dagestani MMA never threw a single professional punch. Maybe the real greatest of all time was the coach standing in the corner, the father who built champions out of village kids and never lived to hear the full applause. What do you think? Drop your take in the comments. We genuinely want to hear it. And if you want more real stories from the world of fighting, the legends, the families, and the legacies behind the biggest names, hit subscribe and stick around. We have a new one for you every single week.